All right, all right. So here's what's so crazy. And again, this is a beautiful thing to have the opportunity to have my guy, for me, one of the greatest college coaches of all time because of everything he's accomplished. No matter where he's been, he's won. So he's a fan favorite to me. I'm a big Rich Rod guy. So this is going to be this is blessed, and I'm highly favored to have him on my show, Relatively Sports with Eugene Napoleon, none other than Rich Rodriguez. What's going on, Coach?
Eugene, and I appreciate the words, and back to you, one of I think one of the greatest college running backs ever, obviously in the history of West Virginia, but also if you look at the stats, what he did in college football, I was saying some of your highlights the other day. Here's what I didn't realize: how big those damn shoulder pads were back in the day. I mean, we had neck rolls and shoulder pads, and we had all this equipment. I'm like, how did we even run? But somehow my man could still run fast with all that gear on him. I don't know. Nowadays, they don't wear nothing, but it was, that was fun to see.
Absolutely. Somebody had brought that to my attention, and actually had to think about it. So I was trying, it was a younger person. I was trying to play it off like they wasn't that big. And I said, you know what? Whenever you say something is not that, it's like, yeah, that was really big.
Yeah, it was big. It was some big old pads. Back in the day when we wore neck rolls and actually had to cover our knees because that turf was so damn hard and just like a concrete thing. And yeah, back Absolutely. In the good old days, right?
Listen, those were the good old days. And speaking of which, I want to go back as far as when you came out of high school, Coach. Was West Virginia always your primary stop?
Yeah, I was just telling a group of folks we had in the other day for a visit. We had a bunch of invited walk-ons coming, and I told them, I said, I was an invited walk-on to West Virginia, and I only lived 45 minutes away, but it might have been 12 hours away because I never got up there. That was the big city. I lived in a little Grant town, West Virginia, and so got a chance to go up there as a walk-on. And I said, my best opportunity for me to climb the depth chart was that my defensive back coach was so mean. You remember Bill McConnell? Oh my gosh, he was mean. He was so mean that I was moving up the depth chart by default because two guys in front of me quit. And I'm like, if I keep hanging on, I'm gonna get me a scholarship and start. So that's my motive. But I loved it up there. I mean, the stadium was new, and it worked out good.
Absolutely. You know what's so crazy? When me and AB transferred over from Pitt, and we came over to WVU, and that's when you and I first met. We've known each other, and I was thinking about this. My God.
40 years. Can you think about that now?
Unbelievable. But you want to know something? That speaks to how strong bonds and relationships really are.
And I think, Eugene, you mentioned a lot of people have asked about, my time as a coach there back in the early 2000s and my time as a player. What stood out the most. And everybody talks about team and family and all that. All the coaches preached that, but it truly was that. I mean, guys truly cared about each other. Back then, when we were playing, we had to live together for 3 years in Towers dormitory, right? And so you got close that way. And then when I had those good teams in the early 2000s, they all had a special bond and cared about each other and had great leadership. And I think the state of West Virginia, leads to that because it is a big family-oriented state where everybody kind of takes care of everybody else, and there's a lot of pride in who they are and who we are. And I know we had that when I was playing there, and fortunately, we had that when I was coaching there as well.
That's important, and that's something I think when you move on as a player, and you still have the relationship with your prior coach, and it's extended over the years, that's when you know you made the right decision, and that's when you know you've been around the right people.
That's funny you say that. That's exactly right. Because I have had some folks, younger coaches, say, "Well, Coach, what's your goal? As far as whether it's winning championships and all that." And I said, this sounds kind of Pollyannish. I said, but really, my number one overarching goal as a coach is that for every player that played in our program, and if they come back 10, 15, 20 years from now and said if they could do it over again, they do it at the same place with the same people, then we know we did our job. That means they enjoyed the experience. Now, winning helps the experience, right? So that's always a big part of it. But it's more than that. And if you got guys saying, "Boy, I loved my time there. I'd do it all over again with those folks," then we know as a staff we did what we were supposed to do by that guy.
Right. And that's the most important thing. I mean, at the end of the day, it's truly building legacy in two ways. For me, to have the ability to come back 40 and be tied to you for 40 freaking years as a friend, man, you have no idea what that means to me. And then conversely, to see what you're still doing 40 years later. I mean,
Yeah, I know.
When you stop to think about it from that perspective, that's truly a blessing, Coach. It really is.
Well, yeah, every year as a head coach in college, they're like dog years. They're like 7 years. So I really have 160 years of experience. But no, the truth is, I've been blessed. This will be my, I guess, 26 years as a head coach. But I tell everybody, I said, if all you did was the same thing every year, never learned or grew, you just have 1 year experience repeated 20 times or 25 times. So I like to think, every year I expect my players to get better, but I expect myself to get better. So I've got to be a better coach, and I am a better coach than I was a year ago, 10 years ago, or 20 years ago. And that's the same thing I ask for our staff, and the same thing I ask for our players. And I think we're there. I've got a lot more time behind me than ahead of me, but I feel great where I'm at. I feel great with the staff. And I have great memories too. Everybody asked me about our time at West Virginia. As a player, it was great. And as a coach, it was great. I truly have, and probably have not expressed this enough, I truly appreciated all the support I got when I was there. Those 7 years were great, and I loved the people. It's still my home. My mom's still there. My brother's still there. My closest friends are still there in the state, and it's a great place. But I really probably, there's mistakes made and all this and stuff. But when I left, but I one of the biggest regrets and mistakes is I didn't tell everybody thank you for the support, because I had tremendous support while I was there.
Yeah. But you know what? It's interesting, and I'm glad that you have expressed that in many different times, in many different ways, because that's important. Obviously, to me, gratitude means a lot. And when you tell somebody humility and mistakes and all that kind of stuff, that stuff means a lot. Now, unfortunately, for those who don't understand that, what can you do? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What can you do?
But what was nice. Yeah, what was nice when we were there back was the former players, and every former player at every school always, they want to be on the sidelines. They want to be out, make sure you get taken care of, and make sure the coaches are listening to them. That's the same everywhere. But I was easy for me to be the coach and the former player there, because I knew the guys and I knew where they were coming from, and they knew where I was coming from. And so from that respect, everybody says coaching at your alma mater, the biggest benefit was that you understood the lay of the land, so to speak, but also you understood the former players and where they're coming from. And so from that stand, and the former players, Eugene, yourself, your class, all your teammates, the guys I played with, and the guys afterwards, we had a good relationship, and guys understood, what can we do to help? And that's all former players really want. No matter where you're at, they want their school to succeed, and they want to know how they can help. And, a lot of ways they can help just by being positive. Obviously, if they see a good player, send a good player, and just really more than anything, as you mentioned earlier, say, listen, I had a great experience there. I loved the town. Morgantown's a great town. The school's a great school. And playing football there is like being a pro athlete from the standpoint of you got everybody's attention. You do in the whole state.
Absolutely. And it's funny, I want to transition to that point. So it's a great segue into this. You coaching in the Big East, and then seeing the transition from the Big East to where I like to call it conference realignment at this particular point, because everybody's everywhere. To see WVU go from the Big East and you make this transition into the Big 12, for instance. I know I want to congratulate you, because you're about to do that right now. You're going to transition into a bigger conference, I would imagine, right? That is a bigger conference, FBS. How do you do that what do you do as far as recruiting to get your players prepared to make that jump?
Yeah, along the same lines. Like I'm to the point now. I'm kind of like a lot of coaches do coach speak. I'm past that. I just tell like it is. And I've heard a lot of people wonder like, why is West Virginia the Big 12? And I was there when all this conference realignment was going on. And I remember we had conversations with the Big East. You had your football schools, you had your basketball schools, and you had Notre Dame, and everybody was out for themselves. And at the time, some of the schools in the Big East said, well, we'll just all hang together and, kumbaya and all that. And I said, that ain't going to happen. I remember telling our administration, I said, they're going to jump as soon as they can jump. And we got to look out what's best for West Virginia. And hell, don't worry about the rest of those other schools because they ain't worried about us. And at the time, that's what happened. Pitt jumped, Syracuse jumped, and the Big East from what was going to be a really, really big league was folding up. And I remember our administration at the time agreed with me, but it happened so fast. I said, we better get lined up with something. And after I left, that's when the Big 12 came up. And people said, why did we join the Big 12? We didn't have much choice. You tried to get in the ACC, they wouldn't take us. Tried to get in the Big 10, they wouldn't take us. And the Big East wouldn't stick together. And there was too many different factions, football, basketball, Notre Dame being an independent, that everybody wasn't going to go in the same direction with that. And we had a good product to sell, but it was kind of like we were going to be on our own. And I know the Big 12, all the Power 5 conferences pay a whole lot better now than they did back then. Right. We're getting, West Virginia's getting paid pretty good money, but still there's a danger of what's going to happen next. And everybody's got it, sounds bad, but every school has to be selfish in their decision. And when West Virginia got in the Big 12, they had to do that because there wasn't much options. I don't know if there's going to be any options going forward, but I think West Virginia, is a natural for the ACC. I think it's good. People say it ain't good enough academic for the Big 10. Hell, it was good enough for me and you, right? And our degrees. So,
absolutely,
it's as good as the other ones. So I don't know if it's ever going to, if West Virginia is going to be able to, our school's going to be able to get into the ACC, or if the Big 12 is going to be able to compete with the other ones, the SEC and all that. But I think you got a good enough product that, a power, whatever that Power 5 thing is, WU should be in it. They should be in it for sure.
No doubt. I'm telling you again, I want to congratulate you because I see what you're doing with your program at Jack State, and it's incredible. Again, transitioning into a bigger conference, FBS ball. What are you looking most forward to with that transition?
That's good. And thanks for asking. Jacksonville State is always, they won their Division II way back when. Then they moved up to 1AA and won and had success. And then I got the job a year ago. The school said, listen, we're going to build a brand new facility, $40 million facility, and we're going to move up to FBS Division 1A level and be in Conference USA. And that's a process. And I think maybe because I had have a lot of Division 1A experience is probably why they wanted us to come, because they had, the coach before me had great success. And coming here, we told our guys, I said, the most important thing as a coach, when you take over a program, particularly if a program that's going to be moving up, you got to establish the right culture. You got to have great players, that, and you got to have a great staff. But more than anything, you got to have the right culture, the right environment. And the first year is always the hardest to get that established, right? And so I was really proud of our players, really proud of our staff that we went 9-2. We won the conference that we went undefeated in that. But more than anything, the culture and the environment that I thought you had to have to build a championship 1A program is already established. Now you got to keep working on it. It's an everyday thing.
Right.
It's like enforcing discipline. I tell our guys, discipline is not a negative thing. It's a form of love. When you get your guys to be disciplined, all right, you're actually doing them a favor. You're doing, it's like the guy last night's games, Osai from Cincinnati, right? Or the penalty. He had a great game, number 58. Had sacks, all that. He's all over the place, all over the field. Had a great game, and unfortunately, he had a penalty. Bad penalty toward the end. It cost him 15 yards in Kansas City. You could tell he was distraught by it. And all he's got people are going to talk about is that penalty when he had a great game. And not that he doesn't have discipline, but that the example is if he had that self-discipline where he wouldn't have taken that penalty, all right, then he would have been talking about, they might have had a chance to win the game. So I tell our guys, discipline is a form of love. And sometimes it's not easy to take, but we're going to enforce it. And that's what we did this year with our team. I really like the culture where we're at. Now we've got to build our facilities. We got to recruit at a high level, but it's coming here, and it's pretty exciting.
And that's the thing. You just hit on so many different things, but I want to get to the state of recruiting, because we all know that this NIL stuff and the transfer portal. What do you think about the transfer portal? Let's tackle that first. What's your thoughts on the transfer portal?
Well, I think it makes it. I understand the reasoning behind that, because if guys aren't happy, you don't want. But I mean, I think it's made it. I mean, you follow the pro leagues, the people that have long success. They don't have open free agency every year. You got to have some kind of rules and guardrails. And plus, I think it makes it easy for a lot of guys to say, well, shoot, I'm not playing. I quit. I go somewhere else. It makes it too easy for kids to quit and not fight through things. I mean, it's like if a lot of times coaches now are saying, well, you got to coach the guys on your team too, or you got to keep recruiting them to stay on her. Well, if you do, you got the wrong guy. You got the wrong guys on your team. I think you got to coach them all, treat them fairly. You got to communicate better. Everyone says, what's the difference between coaching guys when we played and coaching guys now? I said, 20, 30 years ago, you tell a guy, okay, run through the wall, for instance, and they'll do it, no questions asked. Now they'll still do it, and they want to know why. And if they don't give the right answer, they'll go on their phone and Google and say, well, that ain't what it says right here in Google. So they're smarter. Young guys are smarter, but you still got to try to get a sense of loyalty. These guys that are just jumping ship, well, I'm not getting paid enough, I'm not playing enough, and I know I'm an 18-year-old true freshman, I can't bench 200 pounds, but I should be the guy. And I'm like, no, work your way up to that and do that. I think, I don't know if there's easy answers, but I said, okay, let everybody transfer if they want, but they have to sit out a year and not count against their 5 years of eligibility. Because what's happening now, all these kids are leaving. The academic piece is not getting lost in the shuffle. The credits aren't transferring. They're not going to be able to graduate. And I said, what about, let them transfer, be on scholarship. That doesn't count till you're 5 years to play 4 years and move on that way. Instead of just jumping because I think I can play over here, and, I don't want to wait and all that kind of stuff. It's made a little bit of a mess, and there's a lot of tampering going on. Coaches going through different channels to recruit guys to their team, and it's a bad look. And the same thing with NIL, before you even bring it up. I'm in favor of doing everything you can to take care of college athletes, pay them all something, but pay them all the same. And then if you want to do something, get a reward system. Okay, if they play so many plays and they win, whatever, and they can give some kind of a bonus, but it should be the same for every team. You can't have a pro league without a salary cap, all right, and a roster size limit. I mean, think about it, Eugene. What's to stop a team now to say, okay, I want to, take care of our players, but I want to have, instead of 85 guys on scholarship, I want to have 125. So go fund me 45 more scholarships. That way I'll have 45 more players than you do. And somebody gets hurt or somebody leaves, I got somebody to plug right in there. Every league has a roster cap, a certain number of guys. Now it's open to have somebody I could have 150 guys if I want. It's crazy.
Yeah, there's two things to that, which is interesting. I said about the transfer portal piece, the educational component is being lost in that transition. So for me, I said, if a guy wants to transfer from school A and go to school B, that's fine, perfectly fine. But guess what? You better make sure that in order for you to be eligible to play at school B, your GPA has to be a certain GPA, period. Yeah. And if not, you have to sit out. That way, it'll stop. That'll stop about 45% of people jumping in that portal, because good and doggone well, you don't have the GPA to do such, to make yourself eligible to play. That was one. On the NIL deal, like you just said, Coach, I'm good with that. Name likeness. Look, you bring a certain level of value to a university or a college. That's fine. Here's the catch-22. There are certain schools that I know for sure, and you know this as well, that the NIL was prevalent way before.
Yeah.
So let's be clear about that.
Yeah.
Let's be clear about it. I've always said, give a kid a little bit more above his or her scholarship for room and board. Let's say if you said it's 10 grand more than what you're going to get on your scholarship. That's fine. You have a certain GPA, we're going to give you $10,000 more for your room and board. We all know it doesn't cost that much to live off campus.
Right.
So even if you did that, if the NCAA instituted that, I don't know if you would have had what we have right now. But now that you don't open Pandora's box.
That's right. You can't put the genie back in the bottle. And
Nah.
another part that how's a lot. I think still the most important thing you have in your program is the culture and your environment. So you're going to pay this hotshot freshman $100,000, and the guy's a 3-year starter and still in front of him is not getting anything. I mean, that's not the right culture you have. That's why the NFL, they have a salary cap and they have a structure, a rookie cap, that the starting quarterback is going to get 16% of your salary cap. The third team freshman rookie quarterback is not going to get that. And so and they know how to do that. In college, we just opened everything up and said, well, geez, we can't not pay them. Yes, you can. You can't do the pay for play. So let's not kid ourselves, but let's come up with a reward system. What if you graduate? You get a bonus of $20,000 or something. And there's so many more benefits that athletes are not getting mistreated. Let's get that out in the open right now. They've got more now than they've ever gotten. That's a good thing. We're on a great path right there. You don't need to pay them like pros. There's pro leagues out there. All you got, if you're good enough, you can go pro in 3 years. I think one rule they should change. If they think they're good enough to go pro out of high school, let them go pro. Why do we make them wait 3 years? If they're good enough after 2 years, like a Herschel Walker or something, let them go. Let's not make them wait anything. And it's the same way with this. We're getting ready to have sign day. People ask my opinion on sign day. I know I give you a lot of subjects. I'm like, there should be no sign day. If you're a talented musician or an artist and you know that field, you don't wait till a certain date where you sign a contract. Two sides come to agreement and you sign the deal. And if you want to break the deal, then you got to pay for it. That pay says, well, coaches can move from here and there. And trust me, I know all about that deal. Well, if you break the contract, you got to pay, right? So let's just start. We're gonna have to start signing guys to contracts and go in that world as long as we want to stay in this so-called professional model.
I'm telling you, and it's funny you say that because that was my thought. My wife's a collegiate basketball coach, and we talk about this stuff. She's nowhere at that, but she's coached at every level. She's now at the junior college, 2-year program, and they're giving scholarships now. So we're talking about that as we're going along, as she's recruiting. She's been at the collegiate level now 20, 22, 23 years. And we haven't seen it as jam-packed as we are now with all these different nuances. But you're 100% right. It's funny about when you go out to recruit, and I know you 40 years, so I know how you are when it comes to open dialogue. And I've always respected that. If you tell somebody something, that's what it is. I think nowadays it's unfortunate that, like you said, some of these recruits, it's hard to tell them, look, you're not going to play until you're a sophomore or a junior. Because I got 2 guys or 3 guys ahead of you, and you're going to have to come here and bust your hump to get that opportunity. They don't want to hear that. If they come in there and maybe 2 slices of cheese is not on their cheeseburger, they're out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So for you, how difficult is that when you go out to recruit and you sit in these parents in their parents' home to tell this young person, look, here's what it is. How hard is that for you now than what it was, let's say, 10 years ago?
That's a good question. I think the most thing, and this is what the parents have told me, like even this past few weekends, we've had recruits on campus. They say, one thing we feel, Coach, when we're visiting with you and the staff is that you're authentic, you're real. And I said, you know what? That's the easiest way, the only way to be. I coached my son, for a few years and they finished up in Monroe. And I asked him, I said, Brett, what's the most important thing from a player standpoint you want from your coach? He said 2 things, Dad. Don't waste our time and always tell us the truth. Well, that's the easiest way to do things. And so much BS is going on now. Kids are talking to agents, coaches are misleading them. And we tell our guys, like in recruiting, like you're saying way about playing time. I said, I'm never going to guarantee a guy that you'll start as soon as you come, because that's not fair to you or the guys on the team. But I don't recruit guys to be backups either. If I'm recruiting you, it's because we think you can play. And if you're good enough to win with, that's the key. If you're good enough to win with, you will play. Because I don't want talented guys standing next to me on the sidelines because we didn't teach them right. So we tell our guys, everybody gets the opportunity, but we're not going to guarantee anybody that you'll start from day one. And unfortunately, sometimes it's not the player. It could be a family member or a handler or agent saying, you got to go and you got to start there. If not, you're going to leave. Well, If that's the guy, they say that to me, I ain't recruiting him because he'll be a pain in the butt this whole time. Let's go get the guy that's going to fit our culture. And there's guys out there. I'm convinced that, players will adapt to their environment. If they know that, hey, I've got to work and earn success, I can't not given success. I got to earn success when I go there. They'll be more appreciative when they get there, and it's that environment. And that's the thing that I tell my staff every day. And that that when you do that, then the players wind up being the best guys on your staff to recruit. And that's what they do. We turn our guys over to our players, and we tell them exactly like it is. And they do a great job, and they appreciate that. And your locker room is better because of that.
Absolutely. But it goes back to what you said. That culture is so important. Had I had that, unfortunately, I left Pitt due to my sister passing, and I didn't like the way the staff handled her death. And that was tough. That was tough to swallow for me and my family. So had that been handled a little bit differently, who knows what would have happened. But when I met Coach Nealon, like you said, it was straight down the middle. Here's what it is. Here's the opportunity. Now it's up to you to seize that opportunity. You can respect that.
That's right. It's what people say a lot of times, like, there's this guy's a player's coach. I'm like, what is that? I'm hired to be I'm a player's coach. I coach the players. I always tell players play, coaches coach, administrators administrate, whatever. That's what we do. And I tell our guys, I said, I want to have a great relationship with you. And I've been blessed. I have a great relationship with all the former players, the guys, and they still talk to me this day. But it's because you're honest with them. You help them create value for themselves. See, that's the one, the same thing at pro level. Buddies of mine that coach in the pros and playing the pros, they'll say, the number one thing that a pro player wants from their coach is to help them create value for themselves and have a longer career and a more extensive career where they can have a great living. That's part of a coach's job, is that every day to help our players create value for themselves. And that's the players when they come here. I said, listen, you're obviously a valuable person. You're a Division I athlete, whatever. You're going to, but we want to help you become the best person you can be, the best football player you can be. And in 3 or 4 or 5 years, you're going to be better off from having been here than going somewhere else because of the value that we'll give to you. And to me, if you keep that as your focus, not to have to worry about, and I don't tell coaches like, I me, I yell a little bit. So I tell coaches to coach to your personality, but make sure the results are that you've gotten the player the best value you could get, you're having success, and you have the right culture within. And coaches want to be in that environment too.
Wow. I got about a minute left, Coach. I want to ask you a quick question, about a minute left. So giving advice to a young student athlete trying to find a place, what would your advice be to a student athlete trying to find a home?
Well, first off, everybody can make highlight films now because it's easy. They do it on computer, Twitter, whatever the case may be. But also try to find a place, a school, and a staff that that you can thrive in. Don't look for the flash. There's some, out there, they look like fancy cars and all. That's not what you're going to get. Look for the school where they can help you grow, get value for yourself, have success. Obviously, winning is important, but also that has the type of environment, both on and off the field, that you can flourish in. And that should be a big part of your decision.
Wow. Coach, I appreciate you, man. I really do.
Man.
I gotta somehow get down there to check out one of these games.
We do. We have 5 midweek games in the month of October, kind of like the MAC does in November. We're doing it in the month of October, so we'll be like our own reality show. So you'll see us on a channel, on a big channel, somewhere soon in the month of October, and then we have a couple other national televised games. So check us out.
I will, and I may have a half a year of eligibility. I can still got my big pads.
I think you got maybe 2 plays, but I'll still take those 2 plays from you because you'll run hard as hell. I know that.
I appreciate you, Coach. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Great catching up with you.
Always.